little girl called me Aunt Nat in a library, but I had never seen her before. Then I discovered my family had hidden my sister's daughter from me, and one small keychain was about to expose their biggest lie. My name is Natalie Brooks, and I was 34 the afternoon a little girl in a yellow raincoat called me Aunt Nat in the middle of a public library. I had never seen her before. I was standing near the donation table, holding a paper cup of bad coffee, pretending to read the titles on a shelf because I did not want to make small talk with anyone from my mother's church circle. Then a small hand touched my coat sleeve. I looked down, and there she was, maybe 6 years old. Dark hair in 2 uneven braids, rain boots with little stars on them, and eyes that stopped me cold because they were my sister's eyes. She looked up at me like she had been looking for me for a long time and said, "Aunt Nat, can we go home now?" I did not move. I did not breathe right, because I did not have a niece. At least that was what my mother had spent 6 years making me believe. For 3 seconds, the whole library felt silent, even though it was full of people. Children were laughing near the craft table. Someone was checking out books. A volunteer was stacking cookies on a plate. But all I could hear was that child's voice. Aunt Nat, not Natalie, not ma'am, Aunt Nat, the name only my older sister Elena had used for me when we were young, before she disappeared from family dinners, before my mother said Elena had chosen a different life, before every question about her turned into a closed door. The little girl grabbed my hand with both of hers, like she was afraid I might disappear if she let go. Behind her, a woman in a denim jacket came rushing toward us, apologizing before she even reached the table. Her name was Teresa Bell. She was the foster placement. Temporary, she said, just until the county could sort out the family situation. Welcome back to the story. If you like quiet family drama, hidden truth, and the kind of revenge that happens through patience instead of shouting, stay with me and subscribe. Because this was not the day I lost control. This was the day I started collecting the truth. Teresa tried to gently pull the little girl away, but the child stayed attached to me like my hand was the safest thing in the building. "Rosie, sweetheart, come here," Teresa said. Rosie. That was her name. Rosie. She did not look at Teresa. She kept looking at me. "Mommy said if I ever saw Aunt Nat, I should hold her hand," she whispered. The coffee cup in my other hand started shaking. I set it on the table before I dropped it. "Who is your mommy?" I asked, even though something inside me already knew. Rosie reached into the pocket of her yellow raincoat and pulled out a small silver keychain. It had a tiny blue whale attached to it, worn smooth from being held too often. On the back of the whale, scratched into the metal, were 3 words: Rosie Brooks, Elena's girl. Elena's girl. I read it once, then again, because my mind refused to accept the order of the words. Elena had a girl, my sister had a daughter, and nobody had told me. Teresa watched my face change. She lowered her voice and said, "I think you two need to talk to the caseworker." I asked her how Rosie ended up in foster care. Teresa looked down at the child and then back at me. "Her mother passed away 9 weeks ago. The county contacted the grandmother, but things got complicated." The grandmother, my mother, Judith Brooks, the woman who had called me 2 nights earlier to complain that I never came over for Sunday dinner. The woman who had asked me to help organize church receipts. The woman who had said nothing about a dead daughter or a living granddaughter. I drove home that day with Rosie's keychain photographed on my phone and Teresa's number written on the back of a library bookmark. I work as an insurance claims investigator. My job is to find the part of a story that does not match the paperwork. People lie in soft voices. Forms do not. Timelines do not. Bank transfers do not. So when I got to my apartment, I did not call my mother first. I opened my laptop. I searched Elena Brooks. I searched the last address I had for her. I searched county records, obituary pages, court notices, anything that had her name attached to it. The fourth result was a funeral notice from a small home in Ashford, 35 minutes away. Elena Marie Brooks, age 37, private service, no public memorial, no surviving child listed. I stared at that line for a long time. No surviving child listed. Rosie had been standing in front of me that afternoon with my sister's eyes, my family name, and a keychain that said Elena's girl. But my sister's obituary had erased her like she was a spelling mistake. My mother had always been very good at clean stories. She liked clean family photos, clean holiday dinners, clean explanations. Elena moved away because she wanted space. Elena stopped calling because she was difficult. Elena had one pregnancy scare years ago, but it ended, and we should not speak about it. I had accepted those sentences because they came from my mother's mouth, and in our house my mother's version of truth was treated like furniture. It was always there, and nobody questioned it. The next morning, I called the county child welfare office and asked for the caseworker. Her name was Marisol Grant. She spoke carefully, the way people speak when they know every word could become part of a file. I told her I believed Rosie Brooks was my biological niece. There was a pause. Then she asked, "Miss Brooks, did your mother not inform you that we contacted her?" My hand tightened around the phone. "When?" I asked. 6 weeks ago, Marisol said. Judith Brooks signed the family notification form and stated that she would coordinate with relatives. 6 weeks. My mother had known for 6 weeks, 6 weeks of phone calls, 6 weeks of church lunches, 6 weeks of pretending the family was only as broken as she allowed me to see. I asked for a DNA test. I asked for visitation. I asked what I needed to do next. I did not cry on the call. I saved that for later. The DNA results came back 5 days after that. Biological aunt. Probability greater than 99%. I sat at my kitchen table with the report in front of me and felt something inside me open and collapse at the same time. Rosie was Elena's daughter. Elena had raised a child for 6 years while I lived 40 minutes away and knew nothing. My sister had been sick and probably scared. She had died with our family close enough to reach, but too proud, too angry, or too controlled to stretch out a hand. I lined the DNA report with the edge of the table because straight edges help me think. Then I took out a yellow legal pad and wrote 5 columns. What I know, what I need, who lied, who benefits, what they forgot. My mother called that evening. She did not say hello. She said, "Natalie, you need to stop interfering." I looked at the phone for a second and almost laughed, not because it was funny, but because the first thing she felt was not grief. It was control slipping out of her hands. "Interfering with what, Mom?" I asked. "A child you forgot to mention?" She sighed like I was making her tired on purpose. "Rosie is being handled. Your brother and Paige are prepared to step in." My brother Mark had 2 failed businesses, a leased truck he could not afford, and a wife named Paige who smiled like every room owed her something. "Prepared to step in for Rosie," I said, "or prepared to step into Elena's estate?" Silence. Not surprised silence. Calculating silence. Then my mother said, "There are things about Elena you do not understand." I answered, "Then you should have told me 6 years ago." She hung up. 2 days later, Mark and Paige came to my apartment without warning. Paige carried a folder with color tabs, which told me she had practiced. Mark stood behind her with his hands in his pockets, looking at the floor like the floor might defend him. Paige sat on my sofa and started talking about stability. 2-parent home, school district, backyard, family values. Then she said, And with Elena's property in Ashford, it would make sense to keep everything together for Rosie's future. There it was, Elena's property, not Elena's daughter, not Rosie's grief. Property. I asked how they knew about the house. Paige blinked, then recovered. Your mother mentioned it? Of course she had. My mother always released information when it served her plan. Mark finally spoke. Nat, you live alone. You work too much. Rosie needs a real family. I said. Rosie had a real family. Her name was Elena. The rest of us are just trying to decide whether we deserve to be called anything at all. They left angry, but I was not angry yet. Anger is loud, and loud people miss details. After they left, I opened county property records. Elena had owned a small house behind a closed bakery in Ashford. The bakery had been rented out for storage, but the building was paid off. Not rich money, but enough money to make greedy people speak gently. There was also a life insurance policy through Elena's old employer, payable to Rosie's legal guardian, Social Security survivor benefits, a small savings account, a child's future scattered across documents. I wrote it all down. I was not building a revenge plan, not yet. I was building a map. My first supervised visit with Rosie happened in a county family room with plastic chairs, a box of worn crayons, and a clock that ticked too loudly. Rosie came in wearing the yellow raincoat even though it was sunny outside. She held the blue whale keychain in one hand. She sat beside me without being told. For a while, we colored in silence. Then she pushed a purple crayon toward me and said, Mommy said you liked purple when you were little. I swallowed hard. I still do, I said. Rosie nodded like Elena had been right about everything. After a few minutes, she asked if I knew how to make cinnamon toast. I said yes, even though I had not made it in years. Mommy made it when she got tired, Rosie said. She said sugar was not dinner, but sometimes it was medicine. I looked down at the paper because I needed somewhere to put my face. At the end of that visit, Rosie handed me the blue whale keychain. You can keep Blue, she said. Mommy said he was for finding you. I looked at the tiny scratched words again. Rosie Brooks, Elena's girl. Are you sure? I asked. Rosie nodded. Just until I come home. She said it simply, like home was a place already chosen. That night, I sat in my apartment with Blue on the table and searched through every public record I could access. Elena had filed a change of address 6 years earlier. She had worked at a veterinary supply company as a payroll clerk. She had paid taxes, mortgage, utilities, insurance. A whole life, a complete life, a life my mother had reduced to, she wanted distance. A week later, Marisol called and said the county had personal effects from Elena's house that had not been claimed by the estate yet. She asked if I wanted to see them. I said yes before she finished the sentence. The box was small, too small for a life. Inside were 2 sweaters, a stack of children's drawings, a cracked phone, a recipe card for cinnamon toast, and an envelope with my name on it. Not Natalie, Natbird, Elena's old nickname for me. She had called me that when we were kids, because I used to climb the oak tree behind our house and refused to come down. My hands went cold when I saw it. I took the envelope home and left it on my kitchen counter for almost a full day. I had spent years thinking Elena had chosen silence. I was afraid the letter would prove that silence had been chosen for both of us. When I opened it, Elena's handwriting looked smaller than I remembered. She wrote that when she became pregnant, our mother told her she had 2 choices: give the baby up quietly or leave the family quietly. Elena chose Rosie. Judith told everyone there had been no baby. She told Elena I was ashamed of her. She told me Elena wanted nothing to do with us. One lie built from 2 directions. My sister had believed I judged her. I had believed she abandoned me. My mother had stood between us for 6 years and called it protection. Near the end of the letter, Elena wrote, "If you are reading this, I ran out of time, I signed papers, I named you. Mom will try to make Rosie into a secret again. Please don't let her." I read that line until the words blurred. The papers were not in the box, but Elena had left a clue. At the bottom of the letter, she wrote, "Ask Mr. Hall at the bakery. He kept the red folder." Mr. Hall was the older man who rented Elena's bakery building for storage. I drove to Ashford the next morning. The bakery still had faded letters on the window. Sweet Elm Bakery. Mr. Hall remembered Elena. His face softened when I said her name. He took me to a back office and opened a metal filing cabinet. Inside was a red folder with a rubber band around it. "She said if anything happened, this went to Nat Bird," he said. Inside was a notarized standby guardianship document naming me as Rosie's intended guardian. There was also a written exclusion. Judith Brooks was not to be considered because she pressured Elena to erase Rosie and refused to acknowledge the child. Mark and Paige were not to be considered because they had no relationship with Rosie and had shown interest only after learning about the estate. Elena had written one sentence under my name. Natalie was kind before she had a reason to be, and I trust her with my daughter's heart. I sat in my car outside the bakery and cried with the red folder on my lap. Not loudly, not beautifully, just the kind of crying that makes you realize grief has been waiting in a chair for years, and now it is standing up. Then I called an attorney named Rebecca Lane. Rebecca had handled 3 of my company's complicated claim disputes, and she had the calmest voice of any person I had ever met. I told her everything. She told me to send scans immediately. By the end of that day, we had filed for emergency temporary guardianship. 2 days later, Rebecca called with news. Mark and Paige had already filed their own petition. Their filing described me as isolated, work-obsessed, emotionally distant, and unprepared for childcare. My mother had written a supporting statement. For a moment, I could not speak. My mother had hidden Rosie from me, hidden Elena's illness, hidden the funeral, hidden the papers, and now she was telling a court I was too distant to love a child I had not been allowed to know. That was the moment the story changed for me. Before that, I wanted Rosie safe. After that, I wanted the truth in a room where my mother could not edit it. Subscribe if you are still with this story, because this is where quiet stops looking like silence and starts looking like strategy. Rebecca told me we needed more than emotion. Judges respected documents, I said. Good, so do I. I requested probate records, I requested estate filings. I reviewed every form attached to Elena's property. That was when I found the first ugly number. 3 weeks after Elena died, someone had submitted an application to become representative payee for Rosie's survivor benefits. The copy in the public packet had the name redacted, but the bank routing information was visible enough to trace through an estate objection Rebecca filed. The account belonged to Mark and Paige. They had asked to receive Rosie's monthly benefits before they had custody, before they had legal authority, before they had even met her. 2 payments had gone through before the agency froze the account pending review. Paige had written child transition expenses as the reason. Rosie was still with Teresa. Mark and Paige had not bought her a coat, a meal, or a toothbrush. I printed everything, the benefit form, the frozen deposit notice, the timeline, Elena's letter, the guardianship document, my DNA report, Marisol's visitation notes, Mr. Hall's statement. I labeled each file with the same care I used in insurance fraud cases. Evidence does not get stronger because you hate someone. It gets stronger because you organize it well. Then my mother invited me to a family meeting. She used those exact words, family meeting, as if the family had not been meeting without me for years. It was held at her house on a Saturday afternoon. The living room looked the same as it always had: white curtains, glass lamps, framed photos where Elena disappeared after age 29. Mark and Paige sat on the sofa. Paige had another folder. My mother sat in the armchair near the window, where she always looked like a judge even before anyone gave her authority. Marisol had been invited too, because my mother thought official people could be softened with cookies and a clean rug. She was wrong. My mother began by saying Rosie needed stability. She said Mark and Paige had the right family structure. She said I had always preferred work over people. She said Natalie has never been responsible for anything that needed love. I let her speak. It is strange how calm you can become when a person is proving your case for you. Paige talked about schools. Mark talked about church. My mother talked about reputation without using the word reputation. Then Marisol asked one question. Mrs. Brooks, why did you wait 6 weeks after notification to inform Natalie that her biological niece existed? The room changed. My mother's mouth tightened. Paige looked at Mark. Mark looked at the carpet. Nobody answered, so Marisol asked again, softer this time, which made it worse. Finally, my mother said, because Elena made choices that damaged this family, and I was not going to let that damage continue through the child. There are sentences that do not explode. They freeze. That one froze the room. Then I heard a small sound in the hall. Teresa had arrived early with Rosie for a scheduled, supervised handoff. Rosie stood near the doorway in her yellow raincoat, holding the sleeve with both hands. She had heard enough. Her face was still, but her eyes were huge. I stood, crossed the room, and knelt in front of her. "Hey, Rosie," I said, "we're going for a drive." My mother said my name sharply. I did not look back. I took Rosie's hand and walked out. In the car, Rosie stared at the window. After 10 minutes, she asked, "Did Grandma Judy mean I hurt people?" I kept both hands on the steering wheel until I trusted my voice. "No," I said. "Adults sometimes blame children for pain that children did not create." She thought about that. Mommy said I was the best thing she kept. My throat burned. Your mommy was right. That evening, after Teresa picked Rosie up, I added my mother's statement to the file. Not because I wanted to hurt her, because she had said it in front of a caseworker and a child, and truth spoken carelessly is still truth. The hearing came 5 weeks later. I wore a gray suit, flat shoes, and no jewelry except the blue whale keychain clipped inside my bag. Rebecca told me not to expect drama. I told her I did not need drama. I had exhibits. The courtroom was smaller than I expected. Judge Caroline Mercer sat behind the bench with reading glasses low on her nose. Mark and Paige sat with their attorney. My mother sat behind them in the gallery, upright, polished, and cold. Marisol sat near the front with her report. Mr. Hall was there too, holding his cap in both hands. Mark and Paige's attorney went first. He said they offered a traditional home. He said I had no parenting experience. He said I had built a life around independence, not caregiving. Paige dabbed her eyes at the right moments. Mark looked serious in a suit he had probably bought for the hearing. Their attorney said, "A child needs warmth, Your Honor, not an investigator with a file cabinet." Rebecca touched my arm under the table. Just once. I stayed still. I had learned long ago that when someone mocks your evidence, it usually means they are afraid of it. Rebecca stood and entered Elena's notarized guardianship document. She read the naming clause. Then she read the exclusions. My mother's face did not move, but her hands tightened in her lap. Paige stopped crying. Mark stared straight ahead. Rebecca entered the DNA test, the county notification form signed by Judith, the visitation reports, and Mr. Hall's statement confirming Elena had left the red folder for me. Then Rebecca entered the representative payee application. She walked through the dates slowly. Elena died. Judith was notified. Mark and Paige applied for benefits. Mark and Paige filed for guardianship. Only after that did anyone contact me. The pattern sat there in the courtroom like a table nobody could pretend not to see. Their attorney objected twice. Judge Mercer overruled him twice. Rebecca showed the frozen deposits. She showed that Rosie had never been in Mark and Paige's care. She showed that Paige had listed transition expenses before any transition existed. Then she said, while my client was discovering the child in a public library by accident, the respondents were attempting to redirect that child's money into their personal account. Paige whispered something to Mark. Mark did not answer. Then my mother stood up from the gallery without being asked. This is exactly why I kept it quiet, she said. Elena's choices have dragged this family through enough shame. Judge Mercer looked over her glasses. Mrs. Brooks, sit down. My mother did not sit. I was trying to protect what was left of my family. The judge's voice turned hard. Mrs. Brooks, sit down now. She sat, but the sentence had already entered the air, and the court reporter had already taken it down. Rebecca asked if I wanted to speak. I stood. My legs felt steady, which surprised me. Your Honor, I am not asking for control of Elena's estate, I said. I am asking that every dollar belonging to Rosie be placed into a protected trust with an independent fiduciary. Her house, her benefits, and her insurance should be used for her education, health, therapy, and future. I do not want access to the principal. I do not want reimbursement for loving her. The money is Rosie's. I looked at the judge, not at my mother. What I want is to honor what my sister wrote before she died. Elena named me. She trusted me. And a little girl found me in a library because her mother had given her enough love to keep looking for family, even after this family looked away. The courtroom was quiet. I took one breath. My mother called Rosie damage. Mark and Paige called her a transition. I am asking this court to call her what she is. A child with a name, a home to build, and a mother who planned for her even when she was dying. I sat down. Rebecca's hand found my wrist and squeezed once. Judge Mercer did not rule immediately. She took 20 minutes to review the documents. Those 20 minutes felt like a year. When she returned, she said Elena's documented wishes carried significant weight. She said the court was concerned by Judith's delay in notifying family, by the language used about the child, and by the premature benefits application filed by Mark and Paige. Temporary guardianship was granted to me, pending a 6-month review for permanent guardianship. The benefits issue was referred for investigation. Elena's estate would be placed under restricted management for Rosie's benefit. Then the judge said one sentence I will never forget. This child was not a family embarrassment. She was a daughter, and she was planned for. Paige left first, fast and pale. Mark followed her, but not close enough to look like a team. My mother stayed seated for a moment. When she finally stood, she looked at me like she wanted to say something that would make her the victim again. But there were too many witnesses now. Too many papers. Too much truth. She walked out without speaking. Rosie was waiting in the hallway with Teresa. She wore the yellow raincoat, even though the sky outside was clear. When she saw me, she ran, then stopped halfway like she was afraid running was not allowed in court. I knelt. "Can I come with you today?" she asked. "Yes," I said. "Today?" She touched the blue whale clipped inside my bag. "Blue found you," she said. "He did," I told her, "but your mommy helped." The months after that were not perfect. Stories like this do not become perfect just because a judge signs a page. Rosie had nightmares. I burned cinnamon toast twice before I learned how Elena made it. I turned my home office into a bedroom with pale green walls because Rosie said pink was too loud. I learned school forms, pediatric appointments, bedtime questions, and the strange fear that comes when you love someone small enough to hold your finger in a parking lot. Mark repaid the benefits through a court-approved plan. Paige's application stayed under review. Their marriage, I heard, did not survive the paperwork. My mother asked once to visit Rosie. I answered through Rebecca that she could begin with supervised contact after counseling and a written apology that did not include the word shame. She did not reply. I did not chase her. One evening in December, Rosie and I were making cinnamon toast. Snow pressed softly against the windows. She was standing on a chair, spreading butter with the seriousness of a surgeon. She looked at the shelf where I had placed a framed photo of Elena, the red folder, and the blue whale keychain. "Do I have to keep Blue with you now?" she asked. I said, "Only if you want to." Rosie thought about it, then shook her head. "No, he can stay there. I know where home is now." She climbed down from the chair, came to me, and wrapped both arms around my waist. "Aunt Nat," she said, then paused. "Can I call you Mom sometimes?" I closed my eyes for 1 second, not because I was unsure, because some gifts are so large you need a moment to hold them. "Whenever you want," I said. That night, after Rosie fell asleep, I stood in the doorway of her room and looked at the small lamp glowing beside her bed, the raincoat hanging on the chair, and Blue sitting on the shelf where she could see him. I thought about Elena. I thought about 6 stolen years. I thought about how my mother had tried to turn a child into a secret, and how that secret had walked into a library wearing yellow rain boots and found me anyway. I used to believe family was the people who stayed in the picture frames. Now I know better. Family is the person who reads the letter. Family is the person who keeps the keychain. Family is the person who walks into court with the papers and says, "This child was loved before you tried to erase her." That is my story. One little girl in a yellow raincoat. One blue whale keychain. One sister's letter hidden in a red folder. And one family that learned the quiet person was not weak. She was simply waiting for the facts to arrive. If this story reminded you that truth can be delayed but not buried forever, share it with someone who needs that reminder. Comment what you would have done for Rosie. Subscribe for more calm family drama stories, and I'll see you in the next one. The end. Commentary, lesson, and deep story discussion. Let's talk about this story in a different way, because this was not only a story about a little girl in a yellow raincoat. This was not only about a woman who found out she had a niece. And this was not only about a cruel mother, a greedy brother, or a hidden red folder. This story was about control. It was about silence. It was about family lies that were kept alive for years. And most of all, it was about one small child who became the living proof of a truth that everyone tried to bury. Natalie was standing in a library, living an ordinary moment, holding a bad cup of coffee, trying to avoid small talk. Then Rosie touched her sleeve and called her Aunt Nat. That one line changed everything. It did not come like thunder. It came softly, from a child's mouth. But it broke 6 years of lies in 1 second. The most painful part of this story is not only that Natalie had a niece and did not know. The deeper pain is that her entire understanding of her sister had been controlled. Natalie believed Elena had walked away from the family. She believed Elena had chosen distance. She believed Elena did not want her anymore. But the truth was completely different. Elena had been told that Natalie was ashamed of her, and Natalie had been told that Elena wanted nothing to do with the family. One lie was pushed in 2 directions. That is a very cruel kind of manipulation, because both sisters were hurt, and neither of them had the chance to ask the other one the truth. Judith did not just hide a child. She stole 6 years of sisterhood. She stole trust, she stole goodbye, and she called it protection. This is where the story becomes very real. In some families, control does not always look loud or violent. Sometimes control looks clean and respectable. It wears church clothes. It hosts family dinners. It speaks in a calm voice. It says, "We are doing this for the family." But behind those words, there can be shame, pride, and fear of reputation. Judith did not want Elena's pregnancy to become part of the family story. She did not want Rosie to exist in the family picture. So instead of loving her daughter and protecting her granddaughter, she chose silence. She chose image. She chose control. And that is why Rosie's appearance in the library is so powerful. Rosie does not argue. She does not expose anyone on purpose. She simply exists. And sometimes, a person's existence is enough to destroy a lie. The blue whale keychain is one of the strongest symbols in the whole story. It is small, but it carries so much meaning. On the back it says, "Rosie Brooks, Elena's girl." That little keychain is Elena's final message. It says Rosie is real. It says Rosie belongs to Elena. It says Natalie is safe. It says, if the family tries to hide my daughter, she still has a way to find the person I trust. Elena may be gone, but through that keychain, she is still guiding Rosie. That is why blue is not just an object. It is memory. It is proof. It is love turned into something a child can hold. And when Rosie gives it to Natalie, it feels like Elena is placing the truth into Natalie's hands. Natalie's response is what makes this revenge story different. She does not scream. She does not run to her mother's house and create a scene. She does not waste her strength on loud anger. Instead, she starts checking records. That is her power. Natalie is an insurance claims investigator, so she knows that people can lie with soft voices. But documents do not care about emotion. Dates do not care about reputation. Signatures do not care about family pressure. Bank records do not care who looks respectable. So Natalie starts building a truth map. What I know, what I need, who lied, who benefits, what they forgot. This is quiet revenge, not wild revenge, not emotional revenge, organized revenge, patient revenge. The kind of revenge where the truth is collected so carefully that nobody can escape it later. The order of the evidence is important. First, Rosie appears. Then the keychain proves Elena had named her. Then the caseworker reveals Judith knew for 6 weeks and said nothing. Then the DNA test proves Natalie is Rosie's biological aunt. Then Mark and Paige suddenly appear with speeches about stability and family values. Then the property records reveal Elena's house, benefits, and money. Then Elena's letter reveals the original lie. Then the red folder gives legal power to Elena's wishes. Then the benefits application exposes Mark and Paige's greed. By the time the story reaches the courtroom, Natalie is not standing there with only sadness. She is standing there with a timeline. And a timeline is very dangerous to liars because people may lie in pieces. But when the pieces are placed together, the pattern becomes impossible to deny. Mark and Paige are important because they show how greed can dress itself in nice language. They talk about a 2-parent home, school district, backyard, and family values. Those words sound warm, but their actions are cold. Where were they when Rosie needed comfort? Where were they when Elena was sick? Where were they when Rosie was in foster care? Where were they before the property and benefits appeared? Their love arrives after the money, and that tells us everything. The representative payee application is especially ugly because they tried to get Rosie's survivor benefits before they had custody, before they had legal authority, and before they had even cared for her. They did not reach first for Rosie's hand. They reached first for Rosie's money. That is the difference between real family and greedy relatives. Judith's failure is even deeper than Mark and Paige's greed. Judith is not only thinking about money, she is thinking about control and reputation. She believes she has the right to decide who belongs in the family and who should be erased. Elena did not obey her, so Elena became the difficult daughter. Rosie was born from that choice, so Rosie became damage in Judith's mind. That word is painful because Rosie is only a child. She did not create the family's shame. She did not create the conflict. She did not create the lies. But Judith still makes her carry the blame. And when Rosie hears that sentence at the family meeting, the story becomes heartbreaking. A child hears adults talking and starts wondering, did I hurt people? Am I bad? Am I the reason everyone is angry? Natalie's answer in the car shows what real care looks like. She does not tell Rosie to hate her grandmother. She does not put adult bitterness into a child's heart. She says, adults sometimes blame children for pain that children did not create. That line is gentle, but it is powerful. It gives Rosie truth without poison. It protects her heart without turning her into an angry child. That is one of the most mature moments in the story. Because protecting a child is not only about winning custody, it is also about protecting the child's inner voice. If Rosie had kept hearing that she was damaged, she might have carried that wound for years. Natalie stops that shame before it becomes part of Rosie's identity. Elena is gone, but she is present everywhere in this story. She is in Rosie's eyes. She is in the cinnamon toast. She is in the purple crayon. She is in the nickname Natbird. She is in the blue whale keychain. She is in the letter. She is in the red folder. Elena's love is quiet, but it is not weak. Even when she was sick, even when she knew she might run out of time, she still planned for her daughter. She wrote the letter. She signed the guardianship papers. She trusted Mr. Hall. She named Natalie. She left proof. That means Elena was fighting for Rosie even after death. She could not stand in court, but her documents did. She could not hold Rosie's hand in the hallway, but Blue led Rosie to Natalie. She could not speak against Judith in person, but her letter spoke the truth. The red folder is the moment where emotion becomes legal power. Before the red folder, Natalie has pain, DNA proof, and suspicion. After the red folder, she has Elena's documented wishes. Elena clearly named Natalie as Rosie's guardian. She also clearly explained why Judith, Mark, and Paige should not be trusted. That matters because the court does not run on emotion alone. It needs proof. And Elena gave Natalie the exact kind of proof she needed. This is why the courtroom scene feels so satisfying. Judith cannot control that room like she controls her living room. Mark and Paige cannot hide behind soft words. Their attorney can try to make Natalie look cold, but the file cabinet is exactly what saves Rosie. Sometimes love is soft, sometimes love is bedtime and cinnamon toast, but sometimes love is a folder full of evidence. Natalie's speech in court is one of the strongest moments because it proves her motive. She does not ask for Elena's money. She does not ask for control of the estate. She asks that Rosie's money be protected by an independent fiduciary. She says the money should be used for Rosie's education, health, therapy, and future. That one request separates Natalie from everyone else. Mark and Paige moved toward the money. Natalie moved the money away from herself. That is real love. Real love does not say, pay me for caring. Real love says, protect what belongs to the child. When Natalie says, I do not want reimbursement for loving her, the money is Rosie's, she quietly destroys every fake speech Mark and Paige gave. Judge Mercer's sentence gives Rosie back her dignity. This child was not a family embarrassment. She was a daughter, and she was planned for. That line is the emotional justice of the story. Judith called Rosie damage. Mark and Paige treated her like a transition, but the court calls her what she really is: a daughter, a child, a person with rights, a person who was loved, a person who was planned for. That is the real revenge. Not screaming, not public insult, not cruelty. The real revenge is that the truth enters a legal room and corrects the lie. Rosie is no longer a secret. She is no longer shame. She is no longer someone the family can hide. She is seen. The ending is beautiful because it does not pretend everything becomes perfect after court. Rosie still has nightmares. Natalie burns cinnamon toast. There are school forms, appointments, therapy, and bedtime fears. This is important because justice and healing are not the same thing. Justice opens the door, but healing takes time. Rosie lost her mother. Natalie lost her sister. 6 years were stolen from both of them. A court order cannot erase that pain in one day, but now they have truth. They have safety. They have a place to begin again. Natalie turns her home office into a bedroom. She learns Rosie's needs. She keeps Elena's memory alive. She does not replace Elena. She continues Elena's love. That is why the final moment with Blue on the shelf is so emotional. At the beginning, Blue was something Rosie needed to hold because she was lost. It connected her to her mother and helped her find Aunt Nat. But near the end, Rosie says Blue can stay on the shelf because she knows where home is now. That means the keychain has finished its first job. Rosie no longer has to carry safety in her hand. She can feel it in the house. She can feel it with Natalie. She can feel it in the room with pale green walls, in the cinnamon toast, in the photo of Elena, and in the quiet love that is finally stable. And when Rosie asks, "Can I call you Mom sometimes?" the story gives us its softest victory. Natalie does not force that word. She does not demand it. She does not take it like a prize. She understands that Elena will always be Rosie's mother. So when she says, "Whenever you want," she gives Rosie a choice. And that matters because so many adults have made choices over Rosie's life without asking her. Judith hid her. Mark and Paige tried to use her. The court had to decide where she belonged. But in this moment, Rosie gets to choose a word for the person who makes her feel safe. That is love without pressure. That is family without control. So the deeper message of this story is simple but powerful. Truth may be buried by powerful people, but it often survives in small hands. Judith had control. Mark and Paige had plans. Paige had folders. The family had silence, but Rosie had a keychain. Elena had a letter. Natalie had patience. And that was enough. The story reminds us that quiet people should not be underestimated. Natalie's family thought she was alone, work-obsessed, and easy to dismiss. But her quiet life gave her focus. Her work gave her skill. Her patience gave her strength. And her love for Elena gave her courage. She did not become cruel to become strong. She simply became prepared. In the end, this story teaches us that family is not the person who controls the story. Family is the person who protects the child inside the story. Judith wanted to protect reputation. Mark and Paige wanted to reach the money. Elena wanted to protect Rosie's future. Natalie wanted to protect the truth. That is why Natalie wins without becoming like them. She does not erase Elena. She does not steal Rosie's money. She does not turn Rosie into a weapon. She tells the truth, honors her sister, protects the child, and lets the documents speak. And sometimes that is the strongest revenge of all. Because when the truth finally stands up, people who built their power on lies do not need to be pushed. They fall by themselves. That is why this story stays with us. A little girl in a yellow raincoat walked through years of adult lies and found the one person her mother trusted. A blue whale keychain carried more truth than an entire family was willing to speak. A red folder protected a child from people who wanted to use her. And a quiet woman, who everyone underestimated, became the person who brought the facts into the light. In the end, Blue rests on the shelf, not because the past is forgotten, but because Rosie is no longer lost. She knows where home is now,